An absence you may have never noticed while strolling through the eastern wing of your local museum is Mongolian art. Their Tibetan-influenced thangka paintings and slice-of-life bird's-eye view landscapes showed a rich history that combined shamanism, esoteric Buddhism, and a one-of-a-kind nomadic lifestyle. A history that was almost entirely lost after the Mongolian Revolution.
Decades later, a small group of artists dared to rediscover their own past by reincarnating the art form called Mongo.
Mongo.
Reincarnating the art form Mongol Zurag, which pushed the boundaries of socialist realism, melding it with the beautiful ornamentation of the past, like those thangka paintings. But after the fall of the Soviet Union, Mongolia found itself in a freefall with crippling shock economics, private interests swooping in like vultures, destroying lives and putting the ecosystem at risk.
This new demon emerged in two-piece suits, disguised as democracy.
The Mongolian people still fight for their way of life, their lungs, and land. And Mongol Zurag has re-emerged to speak to the struggles of the past, the present, and to manifest a hopeful future.
Welcome to Art Slice, but also welcome to a part of the world and a type of art that is almost entirely absent in the Western world, but has a lot to say and a lot to learn from. I'm Stephanie Dueñas. This is Russell Shoemaker. And a little later on, we will be joined by one of the few scholars on this subject and the curator of Mongol Zurag, Art of Resistance, a show that covered the work of artists separated by decades, different governments, but who all push against the repression of Mongolian life. Orna Tsultem, who also happens to be the daughter of one of the founding members. But before we get into that, we gotta start with a little history lesson.
Because if you're like us, you might be thinking Mongolia. That's like KK. Genghis Khan, perhaps, yurts.
Przhevalsky horses.
Exactly. BYD U8 commercials. And of course, that Mongolian barbecue place that your dad took you to after church every Sunday in your suburban strip mall of choice.
Which is not actually Mongolian
Doesn't
food.
matter. Well, okay. And either way, I loved making the equivalent of like the swamp water, but with meat. You know, swamp water when you go to the fountains, the drink fountains, and just put a little bit of spritz of every soda in the I think they're also called suicides in some cases.
No.
Okay, swamp water. Anyway, I would make like basically the equivalent of a swamp water with like meat and teriyaki sauce.
No.
All the sauces poured in, all the meats poured in.
Wow, that sounds
Let them do their
really...
little, thing on the big grill. It's not actually Mongolian food. That's okay.
Never heard of it.
Okay.
This was so new to us, and it's such a rich history to dive into, a history that is very much still being made. So, Russell, if you could please give us a little taste of what we are seeing, what we're hearing.
Swamp water?
Okay, what does the wind feel like brushing up against our arm hair follicles?
Cold. Feels cold most of the time.
What else?
Mongolia is this sprawling, landlocked country that is sandwiched between the sparsely populated Gobi Desert of China and the mountains and forests of Siberian Russia. You can think of it as this geographical gradation, blending sand to dense forests. Mm-hmm. Maybe the closest equivalent here in America are those wide open spaces and rocky terrains where the Rocky Mountains settle slowly into the desert and eventually into the sprawling coasts after another mountain range, of course.
But much, much wilder.
There are petroglyphs, dinosaur bones, but of course this is the land of Genghis Khan, whose lineage became the leaders or Khanites of nomadic tribes for centuries to follow. The tribes were traditionally shamanistic and still to this day follow rituals like offering milk tea to the earth. Eventually more esoteric forms of Buddhism from Tibet and Nepal would gradually saturate Mongolia, melding the tantric with their existing animistic spirits and deities. Mongolia Tanka paintings became commonplace in art and spiritual practice. They were painted on cloth with earth pigments and sewn into with gold and orange thread. While resembling traditional Tankas, they were updated to suit the landscape of Mongolia.
These require a lot of knowledge of very specific sects of Buddhism, which we simply do not have.
Baseline, you can think of them as meditative, manifestive illustrations of Buddhist deities floating all peacefully up in the air or stomping on the earth all threateningly. They acted as visual guides, helping the practitioner to embody their specific spiritual powers.
In the mid-1600s, Mongolia fell under Qing dynasty Chinese control, sort of. They kept Mongolia at arm's reach, keeping them segregated from the true Chinese population, and worked with Khanates, theocratic leaders, to keep the tribes divided so that no unified Mongolia could declare independence. The last Khanate and Buddhist ruler, Bogd Jijin. Okay, listeners, listen. We are very sorry if we're mispronouncing anybody's names. Okay, we're trying. We promise. But in the meantime, we're going to call this guy BG. Okay, BG. Okay. BG was a complex figure, an eccentric figure, and we have a lot of tea about him. But we just don't have time to talk about it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Milk tea?
Like he liked to have fun, maybe in kind of like a nice wide chuck kind of way. Or maybe in a videodrome kind of way.
We don't know. We don't know for sure. Okay, but we do know that he was an avid supporter of the arts, and he commissioned several works and encouraged experimentation beyond the scope of those Tanka-influenced paintings. In order to get an idea of what the countryside was like and to have art that would connect with his people, he tasked 4 court painters to go beyond the pre-Ulaanbaatar city limits into the Mongolian countryside to observe and to paint what they observed. The most famous example is now known as One Day in Mongolia, which depicts people getting married, women collecting dung, there are death ceremonies, there's intercourse, people are mourning, there are lamas rituals, all meant for public display, and it was secular, okay, not religious, this slice of life, okay? And this kind of reminds us of Don Lupe Posada's skelly street sweepers and tortilla makers. But with this bird's eye view that was not only indicative of Tanka, it also sort of equalizes everything and everyone.
Allowing them to start at any point in the painting and work their way through to other, lives that they might not be as familiar with.
Kind of like building your own pizza.
Or like a swamp water kind of situation at the Mongolian barbecue place in the strip mall. That your dad took you to.
We went to Pollo Loco. Okay. This is the style of work that would become known as Zurag.
While Buddhism cosmology is still in these works, this innovative new painting style was, like you said, secular, but also very nationalistic in a time where the Mongolian people were facing more and more uncertainty and their country was more and more unstable. In the early 1900s, China was having difficulty containing its vast territory against Western and Eastern expansion, and they were fearful of their Russian neighbors. So they were like, all right, maybe it's time to bring those Mongolians in and assimilate with the rest of us. Hopefully they'll, fight off some like Russian occupation if that, happens. But a lot of them were like, you know what? Actually, no, let's use Russia against our Chinese occupiers and fight for our own independence. Because Russia is only interested in ensuring that there's like this buffer zone. So it's going to be like a win-win, right? And that was the case until something big in Bolsheviki happened, right? The Bolshevik Revolution meant the overthrowing of czars and the establishment of a Soviet socialist state, all led by Vladimir Lenin, of course, and Lenin, knowing full well that the czars weaponized the church and theocracy, immediately enacted a strict policy of separation of church and state, imprisoning and in some cases executing those theocratic leaders who had malicious political connections.
Mongolia, the buffer zone, who had changed their profile to socialist curious, was now being inhabited and even controlled by anti-communist white Russians
like the drink.
And Chinese occupiers.
Like the drink, yeah, the other drink.
And thus they asked the Bolsheviks/Soviet army to help them in ridding themselves of their occupiers, effectively making the new Mongolian People's Republic a satellite state.
With Papa USSR babies backing, Mongolia welcomed in an era of socialism, which had its good, had its bad. Collectivist practices did disrupt the nomadic lifestyle, but literacy rates rose and poverty dropped. Basic needs like healthcare, food, and housing were all provided. Everyone was offered free education at Soviet colleges, including artists, and Mongolia itself began the process of industrializing and urban development, opening up to a burgeoning and soon very, very, very large communist network that we ornery little stinker Americans worked for the next 6 decades to dismantle systemically, which opened the doors up for people like, Vladimir Putin.
As for the bad, this wasn't like the Mexican Revolutionary Movement, which was a rediscovering of its pre-colonial roots and a vision for the future. This was a replacement of those roots. Traditional Mongolian script was replaced with Cyrillic. Freedom of religion, art, and Mongolian history was heavily restricted, but that Buddhist theocracy was going to suffer the worst.
Many Buddhists actually thought of Lenin as this potential Buddha incarnate who would liberate society from class structures like the caste system, allowing us all to live in this equal harmony. While communist leaders were flattered to hear this, Buddhism itself was hotly debated among communist thinkers, and unfortunately, their prejudices won. It was decided that the belief in reincarnation and personal enlightenment ran counter to the hard work that was ahead of building a socialist utopia, spelling the end of Buddhism in Mongolia. Major temples were destroyed, and public housing was built in its place in the capital, which was renamed Ulaanbaatar, translating to Red Hero. The Soviet soldiers, seeing monks as part of the theocracy, executed many of them, while others were disrobed and took on new positions.
Slowly but surely, the Tanka and Zurag work would be replaced by Stalin's personal preference, socialist realism. Because of this, around 1951, the government paid artists a salary, which included a trip to Moscow, the Russian capital, which was almost 4,000 miles away, to train in the Western/Soviet style of painting, where they learned how to use European mediums like oil, gouache, and watercolor. Orna's father, Orna Tsultem, was now in his late 20s and was among the first of these artists who would bring back their new skills to Mongolia and begin exhibiting. Returning to Ulaanbaatar, he would become renowned for his landscape paintings. But soon, he and his fellow artists began discovering more about Mongolia's purged pre-Soviet past, and they began to wonder, what is true Mongolian painting? In 1968, the Union of Mongolian Artists, of which N was the head, held a show called the Young Artist Exhibition, but this time, the artworks looked different. Some artists were inspired by ancient petroglyphs found in the Mongolian wilderness, or just goats, okay? They just like goats. The public loved it, the Soviets did not, but it only fueled the fuego burning inside these young artists. While still embracing the heart of socialist realism, they challenged the style itself by uncovering the past, integrating those Tanka and Zurag-style works.
But its next iteration started shortly after Mongolia converted to a democracy in the 90s after the fall of the Soviet Union, obviously. And it would be a resistance to a new, more insidious enemy, that of neoliberalism, corrupt politicians, and a wholesale destruction of their beautiful land, which killed off many of the animals that had evolved to thrive there, which put the lives and lungs of everyday Mongolians in great danger even to this day.
So without further ado, let's get into our discussion with Orna Tsultem. The first 4 minutes were cut off by StreamYard. Thank you, StreamYard.
Thank you, StreamYard.
She is an associate professor and the chair in international studies at Indiana University's Herron School of Art and Design.
And listeners, we highly recommend that you watch this one,
Please.
Okay? There are so many visual examples. We're going to go through a lot of them. We just don't have time to describe them all to you in detail, audio only listeners. We love you anyway. You can watch it on YouTube or as a video podcast on Spotify.
Like and subscribe.
But we'll also have the images she discusses on our website, ArtSlicePod.com.
Hit the bell ding.
Hit the bell ding on YouTube, yeah. And maybe on Instagram. I don't know. Maybe not. We'll see. We'll see how that plays out. Maybe maybe on Tumblr or something. I don't know. We're tumbling on Tumblr. I don't know. Whatever's new. Check that out too.
My father was very instrumental in the past century. He was a very celebrated artist, but he was educated in Moscow. So he was the first generation of artists who were educated in Moscow.
Wow.
Of European style of art, and he was among those who brought the whole art institution of exhibitions and journals and art media and stuff like that all to Mongolia, introducing all that, what he learned in Moscow. But he never believed that socialist realism was the only style that art should be showing. He always believed in the diversity of styles in art. He himself was very experimental artist, even for his own days. He allowed exhibitions. He became a chairman of this, again, it's a socialist institution called All Artists Union, and it was non-profit organization which had a membership of artists, but it was funded by the government, and it was also running the galleries and studio houses and supporting financially the artists.
Wow.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
That sounds really nice.
yeah. So the artists were actually paid to be artists, right?
Wow.
In
Wow.
socialist times. And so he allowed, for instance, running of those exhibitions which were not really socialist in their style, but more modern. They were showing abstract paintings, or they were showing paintings that were not about socialist state, but just animals, like this one, the goats, for instance. This is one of the paintings that he showed in 1968 in an exhibition, but he was penalized by the Communist Party because they were not Soviet style paintings, or this one. This is another abstract painting that he showed at that exhibition. So non-figurative art, or the art that didn't show that propaganda of socialist realism, were very discouraged. And the whole exhibition, 1968, was dedicated to kind of diversity of subject matter, themes, and styles.
Okay.
He was penalized. And after that, the censorship became even stronger. But he and other artists, his colleagues with whom he constantly worked, he was very good at teamwork, partnering. They were smart at developing the style that, as I mentioned, they began to call Mongol Zurag, because there would, subject matter theme would show a proletarian soldier with red flames and all that. But actually, the style was all borrowed from Buddhism, from Buddhist paintings.
So this one is by your father, correct? The one with the red flames and kind of like the more socialist army kind of marching in. But it does seem to borrow from, it looks like, is it Tibetan sort of influenced work? Please correct me. It kind of looks like Tonka paintings I've seen.
Yes,
or like,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's a Tonka painting. It's a Mongolian Tonka painting, but the flames and the type of horse here, it's very flat. They don't use anatomy, or they don't use linear perspective in Mongol Zurag. So visually it's differently made, right? So that was something that they were going after, is to have a picture in a different style, and motifs would be, visual elements would be borrowed, taken from the past, taken from what they thought was Mongolian tradition. Yeah, here's another painting by my father about clouds. So it's a very benign theme. So it was shown in exhibitions, and then it made it to a National Gallery of Mongolia. It's where it's now located. But it was made during the heyday of socialist period in Mongol Zurag style. And bigger compositional solution here is to occupy the almost entire painting with clouds, but the clouds are not in realistic way how the socialist painters would be doing, but it's very ornamental. And the hues and the lines of those clouds, and made them really like some sort of a pattern, like some sort of an ornament swirling, and the curls of those lines are very different. And then here is the cityscape. Here is the modern city in the distance, and it's, look how small part of it is, right?
Okay.
It's like maybe 1/10 of a painting. Is this just in the horizon? We see the city kind of hazing in the distance.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
do you
I
see
see.
it?
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, right on.
Yeah, and then you see buildings, the modern buildings, and factories, and you have the smoke coming out from this chimneys in the factories. But then there are youths here, and so it's like a layered with everything. And to the Soviet eye, it would be showing the industrial socialist city, but
Right.
it's of course very different.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. Like I love the billowing, almost looks like billowing smoke kind of like merging in with the clouds above. It's gorgeous. And it does have like the nice like glow that you would see in a more like socialist realism painting, which is just like super hyper real. But you're right, like it just breaks down into ornamentalism and just it looks amazing.
Yeah, I love how it almost starts to look like a tapestry, and maybe it's the way he painted it. I mean, we're not there in person, but yeah, to me it starts to take on that quality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is like a really like awesome melding of socialist realism with, I think, like more Buddhist tradition. It's very, very, very incredible. I didn't notice the cities till you pointed them out. I definitely see them now. That's
Yeah.
Checks all the boxes. It just wasn't the right format, I guess.
Definitely, the city here is not the main focus. Focus are these ornaments made of clouds, and we showed in Venice. Now that I'm doing this research, I'm finding a lot of papers and his sketches and drawings where he was constantly kind of trying his hand, learning or thinking about how to make the style, how to build this motif, how to build this visual language. So he would do this, and he would do like two paintings. He would make painting in socialist realism, in a realistic style with a linear perspective. But he would also make this type of painting where there's no this kind of layering, rather, of of different motifs and elements. So he was trying these different styles and inventing. So we showed in Venice exhibition. In 2024, it was centenary of his life, and so we celebrated with that exhibition in Venice, which you mentioned. And in that exhibition, we showed his sketches, like he would paint a yak, and then he would develop it into a painting. So we had this kind of presentation of his sketches, drawings, as well as paintings.
I always love when curators include sketches and preparatory drawings and stuff like that. So that's great. I love to hear that it was exhibited along with the works.
Get to see the ingredients.
Yeah, I know, right? I think it's the artist in us talking. But it's just it's like a behind the scenes moment that you don't often get, especially with like bigger museums or, more well-known canonical artists. You rarely get to see that in person.
So there's just like a different types of clouds and different hues, right? Different colors. But we found that how he was doing them individually, like every cloud would be like a different pattern of its own, different element of its own. So he was trying them over and over again to make them this curly, beautiful ornament. And then he was kind of developing this idea of how to bring all this together in one canvas, because it's quite big, over 1 meter and 50 centimeters. And it's just the brushwork that I'm also learning with Mongol Zurag is extremely nuanced. So there are no big brushworks here. It's very flexible line work. Different types of brushes are used also to create this fluidity of lines of these ornaments.
Yeah, definitely. Like any illustrator listeners that we have, like check it out. Like this is right up your alley.
Yeah,
it's so interesting.
I agree with that. Yeah.
So can you see brushwork? I maybe missed it, but are you able to see some brushwork in the actual work, or did they paint in such a way to not show the artist's hand on the canvas?
You can actually see, especially if you see it in person, you can see it get close, and you can see that very nuanced layering of shading, for instance, or how it's sort of, especially with the hues. This is a very rich painting with color spectrum, and how this line goes to another color or saturated to another sort of hue of the same color. The orange is not just orange; it has so many hues in it. And we were trying to see even. One artist tried to make a copy, and he couldn't make it because it was just so rich that he said that it will take him months of work. So we were kind of discussing there at the exhibition how long it has taken him to do this. I don't know yet. I have to look at his own diaries to see. But yeah, it was quite a work with the Mongol Zurag, especially with this line and brushwork.
Is this oil paint or is this?
This is oil.
This is oil. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's extra impressive.
You can imagine, right? It's with oil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No wonder they can't figure out how to reproduce it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I hope one day you make it to Mongolia and see that in person. It's engaging. It's very engaging.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would love to.
And then this style, Mongol Zurag, is very lucrative style these days because the class continues, the Mongol Zurag class at art school. And the new graduates artists who are very prominent artists such as Guadalupe, and who shows in many, many countries, and he's in very prestigious collections. And then his colleague, former classmate Baska, Basenja was a full name, but we call him Baska. I had these two artists in the exhibition in Venice. Baska is important art historically to me because he's the one, as early as 2008, started to introduce sort of his clear critique of neoliberalism and a greedy corporate world, as he points out when you talk to him. And he shows it through this metaphor of the man in black ties and suits, just, putting them amidst these figures of divinities and Buddhist Buddha himself, images that look like it's about Buddhism, but then you see this modern man in ties and suits, and he started to kind of use that Mongol Zurag specifically for critiquing the modern day corruption in Mongolia with mining, especially with new laws about privatization of land, commodity, and kind of damaging the land, which becomes an environmental issue for the entire planet.
Recently, there were a lot of protests in Mongolia, right, for a lot of those, the privatization of land, and, fill in here because I'm not an expert in this field, but I know there were protests, like, especially during COVID and even after.
So it's all very true because Mongolia is a very large country. So just size-wise, territorially, it's twice as big as Texas or 3 times big as France, just to have an idea of its territory size. But the population is only like about 3 million people. So it's very barren and it's very rich with deposits. And the mining started, it's new to Mongolia in the 1990s when the multi-party country, the country became democratic country. But the mining was so new that the laws did not protect the rivers and valleys and the mountains, and so much was damaged because half of the population is still pastoral nomad. And so when they damaged the environment, they damaged the economy of the herders. Rangelands, and it's very detrimental to many people because they cannot live on the economy of cattle breeding.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the artists who started to be very clear about their stance against environmental damage, and this is a resistance, how they use the art as resistance. Baska started it in 2008 and 9. Here's another historical painting from 2009. Where the main figure is this man in black suit and tie, and he's having this newspaper hat, and the newspaper hat says, "Today the truth." But just below him, it's all the members of the parliament who are corrupted, and he shows them as monsters, hybrid creatures with horns and antlers.
Right. And it calls back to some of those Buddhist demons, correct? Like.
And then in front of this man, there's a big scroll with some writing, and the writing is in traditional script, just asking this man in black tie and suit, just asking, "Stop ruining the land, leave these mountains and rivers to us."
Right.
Right. So it's very explicit sort of critique of neoliberalism, of corruption, of mining, and all that.
I can imagine that would be such a shock for I think largely like nomadic culture to go to all of a sudden not have access to the land that they had access to for all those years. Because I mean, during the Soviet Union, obviously, like there were problems with that, but they also had collective farming.
Yeah.
things like that. So they were given what they needed, and now they have to all of a sudden fend for themselves.
Right. Yeah, and there were some areas where the mining were so badly damaged that there was no repair environment by these companies that some rivers even, were completely dried up. The issue of water supply, for instance, or the rangelands became so damaged that they couldn't use it as pastures as anymore. But these paintings are made in Mongol Zurag style, the same style that we saw previously in socialist paintings, and you can see the clouds ornamental continuously, and a lot of kind of details. So this is another feature of Mongol Zurag, is just crowded with those details of figures and ornaments and patterns and colors, and it's just incredibly rich.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous painting. Like, we were mesmerized by it, just like
we were zooming in on it and just like soaking it all in.
And like, obviously, like, I mean, I think like it reminded us a little bit of like medieval work, as well as like Indian miniature work, as well as we've mentioned Tibetan work quite a bit. But just like so active, and just keeps your eye like moving in and out of it. And it does, like, the connection to your father, that landscape with the clouds is certainly there as well. Like, you see that as well. So you definitely see the history there.
Grotesqueness, exaggeration. I think those are all kind of part of this style. Because you can see kind of constantly going from humor to grotesqueness.
Yeah.
Here where the men are shown as hybrid creatures and fighting with each other. And then there's an animal creature also of yelping of some sort and stuff like that. So it's very engaging.
Super effective at getting that point across. Because like, even if we don't know the story, like we get a strong sense for it, which is nice. It translates across countries.
Yes. No. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Baska is very, very skillful artist. And here's another work from 2010-11, where we see again there's 76 members of parliament back then. He painted them as skeletons. So there's rows and rows of skeletons. And above them, we see this divinity in two colors, red and blue, which are the markers of the two parties.
Okay.
Just like in this country, in Mongolia too, but the two parties are very different. One is red, is Reformed Communist Party, which is very active still, and then the blue is for Democratic Party. And the horse is two-headed because we don't know the direction where it's going. So it's very political in its message. The main divinity, which is the main figure in this composition, is actually from Tibetan Buddhism. It's known as a Baldalhamo and is a wisdom protector. And Baldalhamo in Tibetan Buddhism is a protectress. She's riding a mule and she's protecting the world, the humanity. So placing his character on this idea of protection, he kind of wants the divinities, the comments kind of protect the environment, protect the world, protect the Mongolian situation.
Gotcha.
The same idea is shown in the green color of the horse, which this character is riding, because the green color is specific to Buddha of future, Maitreya. And here's a painting, detail of the painting from the past, where we see the green horse carrying a statue of Maitreya.
Wow.
And so ideas and motifs are taken once again from Buddhism, but it's not about Buddhism here. It's about political situation today and the artist's voice.
Yeah, something I wanted to say about both of those works that we just talked about was you can enter it from any point in the painting and still get something from it. Like Russell, you said that you don't have to know exactly what the text is saying. You can just look around and get the gist. But like with this one, the Congress. So I didn't realize those were skeletons at all. Like my focus was on the horse. The horse is such a universal symbol, like that they could mean something different to anyone. So I just love how there's these different points of entry. I guess that's what I'm trying to say with these. So they're still accessible. Like again, even if we don't know exactly where the meaning came from in Buddhism.
And for someone like us, like we don't know a ton about the history, of course. it makes you want to dig into that more.
Yeah.
So it's very, very effective. It like made me do more research because, you know, I don't know enough about it. So it's really eye opening to have like something visual tell a history and also kind of question the future. So excellent work.
Yes.
Yeah. And again, this is just to point out how crowded it is with all kinds of figures. Yeah. So they're one of the features of Mongol Zurag is this crowd and their self-composition and the building the narrative based on your own reading, where you start and where you're leading and what kind of connection you're making between these figures. You build your own reading. You're kind of engaging with this.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you can enter some of those like traditional works. You can enter it at any point and kind of move around the composition.
So that is part of Mongol Zurag. Okay,
that's awesome.
I love that. Yes,
yeah, glad we picked up on that.
Yeah, yeah, right.
So I'm presenting my own interpretation, which is very political and it's talking about environmental. But if you believe different discourses here, you know, it's just I think it's all possible. The audience is open to that. His latest work that he showed in Venice was, again, continuing the same thought of Mongol Zurag, the style, the visual picture against resisting against the environmental damage. So in this one, we see again the men in ties now, men in black suits and tie are becoming like, again, hybrid creatures of some sort of flying around. They're like these monsters. And then we have Cyrillic writing, a person who is a loudspeaker, right? Again, talking about this past, the socialism that replaced the original Mongolian script with Cyrillic. And on the below is all these gray houses, very, very dark and sad looking, with all this poverty. The population is poor. The population is air pollution is all over the place, and people are poor, and they're not happy here. And there's all these politicians out there promising with all these promises and loud speaking and flying around. They're promising, but they're not keeping that promise, right? So,
yeah, they almost, to me, they read as almost like vultures or something, like circling the like housing area. And then you have, of course, it looks like bloody hands kind of.
They look like flames.
Yeah, flames or bloody hands. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then I don't know if you can see, but there are also like, he said that when he was talking about this painting, some chemical letters of, chemical elements of like those elements which like air pollution and toxic chemical elements that are toxic to us and to environment. So he was researching that to find out and putting them into his composition. And there is this beautiful little rabbit, but this bunny is only because this painting was made during the year of rabbit.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of this year is a rabbit year. Let's put the rabbit element there.
I forgot to ask Orna what medium this is, and the last couple of paintings we were talking about as well. They weren't all oil, right?
No, they're so this new artist now. They're working mostly with acrylic. They're mostly working. When they study art, they study actually the technique of Buddhist paintings, which is mainly on cloth. So it's cotton where they put the solutions with chalk to kind of create a surface ready for painting. And then they can usually use gouache on that. But in now, just they're still doing that, but in fewer cases though. But mostly they're doing canvas. So these paintings in Venice by younger generation of artists, they were all made on canvas and acrylic.
It's more practical these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So practical, exactly. And I think I just prepared last painting by a woman artist. I'm working on some writing about her at this moment. And this is one of the paintings which is in the collection of Queensland Museum of Art in Australia. And it's showing air polluted capital city of Mongolia, Ulaanbaatar. Ulaanbaatar gets very polluted during winter times because there are a lot of suburban areas are full with yurts, people living in yurts, and they burn coal. And unfortunately, this location used to be a monastery, which was destroyed in 1930s. And when they built the modern buildings, they never thought about how it's sort of surrounded by mountains. So
Right.
air circulation is never happens here. So the smoke of those coming from yurts and factories, they kind of stay as this cloud on top of the city, and there's no enough of air circulation to sort of get rid of this. And this constant discussion and constant political debate and constant hope, expectation of population that the politicians do something about it, the leaders. But they promise when they come to power, but they never keep their promise, and air pollution remains becoming a huge problem for the population. And this painting shows that how gray, how tragic this location is.
I remember when I was reading about the protests, I think it was from 2021, something that they were younger folks protesting, saying that they didn't want to have to leave Mongolia. They wanted the politicians to fix it. They shouldn't have to leave to live a life where their basic human needs, human rights are met.
Right, exactly. And this as we speak, there are protests going again about the same issue of we have rights to be healthy. We have rights to live in a place where we can breathe. We cannot breathe. Our children cannot breathe. Our children are deformed because our mothers are breathing this toxic air and so on and so forth.
I assume they have to like come to the cities now too to look for work because of a lot of the privatization of the land. I would assume.
Yeah. So in this painting, Noming is the artist, woman artist, and Noming is showing the same Buddha of the future, whom I mentioned before. She's basing the central figure on a Buddhist painting from 19th century. And it's occupying their almost entire composition, sort of again looking to projecting the future, but also critiquing the current present, sort of connecting the future with the present in this painting.
What I thought initially before you described it to us is it almost read as like microchips to me. So it also kind of spoke to like mining for those resources. I wasn't thinking smog right off the bat, but I definitely see that as well now that I see the details. So I think it's nice that it reads in multiple ways. Obviously, they're pulling from a lot of like Buddhist work. What is the intent of that? Is that kind of like a sarcasm? Is it a get right with sort of situation? Sorry, I don't have the words for this exactly, but
so it's also the legacy from the past century, because the past century, when the Mongol Zurag was invented as a new style, the motifs they were taking from Buddhist paintings, and now they continue that kind of approach. But with the paintings of Baska, whom we saw before, with Congress and this one, I think they're also putting their kind of hope in those spiritual realms of Buddhist deities to bring the protection that the humans need.
Okay.
Kind of sacralizing the land and the humans and the population. So Mongolians are very spiritual, and they have this kind of centuries-long connection to nature. They're very respectful and spiritual towards nature. And now the land being damaged by these corporations, the mining, many of whom are coming actually from abroad, from overseas. So they are also looking into the spirituality and kind of inviting those deities to come to their paintings to protect.
It's really interesting because I was going to say too, this one specifically, this work feels like a manifestation or some kind of meditation. It's from the future. So you're kind of manifesting that or hoping and giving some hope within the bleak, I guess, cityscape. It really seems like Mongol Zurag's comeback is really timely, especially with everything that's going on, like not just in Mongolia, but I mean, all over the world. So actually, Orna, we did want to ask you if you have any advice for artists as time goes on, this year goes on. Any messages for
that's a very difficult question, because Mongolia, where we have all this kind of difficult times with air pollution, but everywhere we know that environmental issues are huge issues around the planet, right? But I think that what started to happen with Black Lives Matter, and I mention Black Lives Matter here because Mongolia is so marginalized. And I think you too, Stephanie Russell, I'm applauding you to bring into your discussion Mongolian art because it's just, so little known.
Mm-hmm.
And I just hope that more people will be open to that.
Yeah.
And more institutions will be open to that, because museums are still very, very reluctant to show these artists, these very people whom we're looking at the screen, and we're talking how rich they are. They cannot get into our museums. And I just hope that the diversity, the hope for diversity, which Black Lives Matter movement started, it also should affect our museums and institutions. So to give voice to these artists to come to our museums so that we can see these paintings in life.
Yeah, I mean, it just broadens your understanding of the world, and I think it does show some solidarity with other countries as well. That while we have our struggles, other countries have different struggles, and we're all kind of fighting the
same neoliberalism.
Like the last death grip of neoliberalism, I guess. Yeah, that's excellent. No, definitely. Like I was gonna say, like I don't like. Obviously, there's a lot of Buddhist works in museums, and obviously they were often pilfered. Yeah. But you don't see a lot of Mongolian work. Like I was kind of like racking my brain for like anytime I've even run across like Mongolian work, and it's also different. Like I was trying to think of like entry points for a lot of this work from things I do know, like Thai hell gardens and things like that. Kind of reminded me of that, but obviously it has its own take on it because it's a totally different culture. And as like that Buddhism traveled, it also like took on the country that it lived in. So it's entirely different. So it's really, really eye-opening. It's really incredible work. Or
we get the more, I don't say diluted, but like what the modernists were doing. We get bits and pieces of what we see here with Mongol Zurag. So, and something we talk about too with our work, or not with our work, our work talking about artworks, is we like to extend the context, and a lot of it is political, even if the work itself doesn't look that way. So I appreciate the boldness of the Mongol Zurag artists, but also they have no choice but to basically, protest with their artworks. So yeah, I'm really excited that we're here talking about it. I was really blown away by all of the work. And yes, like we're super happy to spread the word about Mongolian art, because everyone should know it should be in every museum, every gallery, everywhere.
Absolutely.
I hope
it's really
we'll see the change. I hope we will see the change. And these artists are talking about the issues we're worried about, the environment and the planet and the pollution. We have it everywhere. So we're connected this way, right? So just the more we feel connected, I think the better is for the world. So I hope this, which are very skillful, high professional, high quality art, and there's just no reason not to be shown. So I hope they will come one day to our museums.
I hope to see it one day.
Yeah. Do you have any exhibitions coming up in the States at all or elsewhere?
Yeah, so I'm preparing for a large exhibition in 2027 at Indiana University here in my own galleries. And we'll see if we can show it elsewhere.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely let us know. We will absolutely go up there. We are not too far from there. So
yeah,
great.
We want to thank Orna for joining us once again. Check out all of her work at www.artmongolia.org.
You don't need to, okay.
I do.
You don't need to say it. But these are highly detailed, nuanced, and gorgeous works that deserve a really long look. So even if you watched along, we recommend that you spend some extra time with these works afterwards.
Please.
And we would love to hear your thoughts about the pieces, either in the comments or just shoot us email, DM, something like that.
Something. We will be back soon with a full episode. Listeners, we swear we are wrapping up like five, I think, actually. 5 maybe more than that. And they take time. Okay, it is just the two of us. We don't have a production team, all right? It's just us. And we also don't have it in us to pay a poor soul $1 an hour for our dirty editing.
Yeah, dirty
editing.
ArtSlice editing. It's dirty. It's grimy. It's gross.
Speaking
greasy,
of dirty,
sticky.
You can support
like
our hard work at patreon.com.
Kind of like the swamp meat teriyaki sauce.
ArtSlicePod.
Yeah.
Or you can grab a t-shirt with your swampy hands at ArtSlicePod.com.
Just wipe your hands on it if you want to, yeah. Basically, put a couple coins in and more ArtSlice comes out. That's how it works. If enough of you put coins in, maybe we'll get more ArtSlice. I don't know. That's just kind of how it works. Otherwise, we have jobs and we have to do those jobs. But thank you, patrons. Thank you for all your support.
We love you so much.
And we will see you very, very soon. We hope you all are well. And yeah, I don't know. I never know how to end these things. Live, laugh, love.
We love you. Take care of each other. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.